So I'm going to be talking about what I do whenever we see little crypto crashes like this. We see retracements, we see bearish trends in the market, and how it actually affects your DeFi portfolio and overall strategy. Now, the first thing that I want to go ahead and just put out there is hold the fucking line, right? We got to hold the line, guys. The reason why is because we are nowhere near what I personally think is the top. I'm expecting Bitcoin to go to $150,000 or so, right? And it could go up to $200,000. It could surpass that, but I think very, very reasonably, Bitcoin can go to about $150,000. If we zoom out, right, we look really, really bad, right? We look like we're at the absolute top, but I am betting that this is going to go higher. It's just we're going to see retracements. We're going to see declines, probably to like 95K or so before we see more inclines. That's just how the market works. It doesn't just go straight up and never stop. It has to have retracements. So when we look over the past, say 3 months, you can see we're in those retracement periods. We haven't seen substantial gains like we saw over here when we went from 70 grand all the way up to 100 grand in the time span of just a couple weeks. But with that being said, I want to go ahead and mention that Bitcoin saw an all-time high of $108,000 recently. When we look at the gains this market, it was previously at a low of roughly $15,000 or so. So Bitcoin went from 15 grand to nearly $110,000. Those are some substantial gains. And that's why I'm here to tell you that you are somewhat late to this market, right? That doesn't mean that Bitcoin's never going to be at higher prices and that, your opportunity for generational wealth is over in crypto. It's absolutely not. There's altcoins, there's Ethereum, there's Solana, right? There's other assets. There's also other markets to come in the future. But this market is going to get harder and harder and harder to make the amount of money that you actually want to make, which is why we need to take advantage of opportunities like this, dips in the market, when Bitcoin's down, when Ethereum's down, when other assets are down. We need to be buying, and we need to use this as an opportunity to accumulate more of these actual assets and actually flywheel those assets into our portfolio so we can consistently produce more income. Again, I personally do not think the market has hit a peak. There's this little coin glass indicator. And again, indicators are indicators at the end of the day, but it's still telling us to hold 100%, right? It's telling us on every single bull market peak indicator that we have not hit the peak quite yet. And we're still pretty far off from the peak. Just something to keep in mind at the end of the day. And just some stuff that I want to go ahead and dive into is obviously what I'm currently doing right now. So obviously I have my liquidity positions, which are producing income. Now I aim to have about 40% liquidity positions and about 60% in hodls. And of those hodls, I want to borrow against them if I can, meaning putting them up over on Aave, putting them up over on Camino, any other lending and borrowing platform where I can borrow against them basically. And ultimately I'm borrowing stablecoins because opportunities like we see today are great buying opportunities. Not only am I going to inject more capital from my personal bank account, right? So we have right over here my bank, and say I inject a total of say $2,000 or so, right? Because we do see, decent amount of dips every single month, and I am dollar cost averaging probably about 5K or so per month, right? But I inject $2,000, that goes up as collateral on these lending and borrowing platforms. It's when I will then take probably about $350 or so. That's kind of on average my lending and borrowing rate. Take $350 and I'll borrow that in USDC, right? So we take that USDC and then we then go and convert it right back up into the assets that we just bought with the bank money, and we put it back on Aave and Camino. That way we are flywheeling this, right? So what exactly could that look like? Say we have Bitcoin right here, and this is over on the Aave platform. Ultimately, we are lending out our Bitcoin, and we lend out $2,000 of Bitcoin that we just accumulated from the bank account, right? That's freshly bought Bitcoin. We bought the dip, right? We want to get a little bit more exposure. So we then go and we borrow $350 in USDC. That right there is a 17.5% loan to value ratio, right? It's not that bad whatsoever. So ultimately, we don't have to worry about getting liquidated or anything like that. It's a very, very light amount of leverage, but a nice friendly amount of leverage, something that's still going to make us a little bit of money, but we're not going to have a ton of risk associated with it, right? That USDC is then going to be used to buy Bitcoin. So we buy our BTC, and then ultimately we take that BTC that we just bought and we put it back up over here, which then turns that $2,000 of Bitcoin into $2,000 of Bitcoin plus $350 for a total of 2.35K of BTC, which then means that we have $2,350 and we have a $350 borrow, which means our loan to value ratio is now shy of 15% as opposed to being at roughly 17.5%. Very, very reasonable. And again, we can also adjust this strategy a little bit. We can buy Bitcoin and we can put that Bitcoin into a liquidity pool and generate income on that. It really depends on your strategy. In my personal opinion right now, I have a good allocation towards liquidity pools. I want to build hodls. There are instances where I want to build liquidity pools, and I will use this strategy to build liquidity pools. Best part is we can pay down that debt, right, using our liquidity pool income. So again, it really depends on where you're currently at with your portfolio. If you're happy with your LP allocations right now, no need to put it back in liquidity pools. Build up your hodls. If you're happy with your hodl allocations, you need more liquidity pool allocations. Take that, build up your liquidity pools, basically. But the point is, this income right here is allowing for all this to happen as well, right? I'm taking the income that I get from here and I'm investing it into hodls as well, which I can then go and put over here on Aave and other lending and borrowing platforms, borrow more USDC on dips, and just flywheel this process right here. Now, something that we all need to get out of our head is this little profit loss number right over here that is red, right? We might be like, oh, but we deployed 10 grand in a liquidity pool. We now have 9 grand and we're like shitting our pants. It's not a good idea to do that. Reason why is because 90% of us that are here, we're either investing into crypto or they're planning on investing into crypto, but then they got into DeFi instead, which means your benchmark should not be US dollars. Your benchmark should be how many Bitcoins do I have versus how many Bitcoins would I have had if I just held Bitcoin instead of putting in a liquidity pool, right? You should be benchmarking not against the US dollar, because frankly, that's not that good of a benchmark. You should be benchmarking against if you held in the market. That's what my $1 million, my $10 million clients do, right? At Builder Wealth, we work with those types of people on our DeFi Legacy program. They are not benchmarking against US dollars. They are benchmarking against if they held their initial assets, if they stuck all of their money in Sol, if they stuck it all in Pith Sol, right? If they stuck it all in these assets. We're looking at this versus hodl number as opposed to just looking at the overall profit loss, because they understand that the market goes up, the market goes down. But again, in this market, their goal is to outweigh if they were to hold their initial assets, right? Again, at the end of the day, we all want to make money, right? But most of us understand that a 10-day, a 30-day, even a 60, 90-day horizon doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to make money. We could see large declines over that horizon, right? The point is, right, if we invest now, we want to accumulate more and more actual assets, the number of assets as opposed to the dollar amount. And then when those do start to appreciate, which we are expecting them to, we have our price predictions, and that's where we make the most of our money. So let's talk about what I did on this crypto crash. Number one, I exited my Ethereum to Aether position. I actually exited this at a pretty decent profit. Overall, I made about 8.7K in earnings, which totaled about 7.2K in overall profit loss. Pretty great. About a 4.8K profit against holding the market. I exited this on January 24th before the market started dipping, and I had that all in Ethereum. So yes, I did still see a dip on the actual amount of Ethereum I got, but at the same exact time, I was out of Aether, which is a way more volatile asset. Then the volatility kicked in. I entered last night into Ethereum to Ondo, a little bit less capital. This time instead of 18 grand, about 12.6K, in which I'm basically at a break even. So I acquired Ondo at a relatively low price. I acquired it when it was underperforming Ethereum. Now it's outperforming Ethereum. And ultimately that was part of my strategy, to be able to essentially sell at a higher price, that position, and then buy back in on a different position at a lower price, something that's going to produce me more income, right? And then ultimately I also went over here and I also injected about $1,000 into, I believe it was Edge token, which is an asset that I wanted to start holding. So 1K went in there, and then about another 1.25K went right into Ondo just to hold it on spot. And then with that being said, I also went over to my Aave position. So we have Aave right here, and I was lending out a bunch of assets. Let's just say hodls, because I'll show you those in just a second. There's way too many to write. I borrowed $1,000 as well, so 1K in USDC, and then I took that 1K in USDC and I shifted it into BTC. I accumulated a little bit more BTC because I did want to get my BTC bag up just a little bit. And if we do see a further dip, I'm going to take out another 2 right over here, because I do have a very, very low loan to value ratio right now. I'm going to take out another $2,000 in that instance, and I'm going to inject that into altcoins, which I will eventually just hold in my wallet because I most likely can't put them up as collateral on Aave, right? So again, that is my current strategy right now. That's what I'm currently doing on this crypto crash. You don't have to do this. Use this as inspiration of what you could do. The point is, your portfolio should grow on its own. Your portfolio should consistently generate more assets, right? Even if it's not generating more dollars. If we start with, let's just say, 1 BTC, we want to now have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, so on and so forth. We want to accumulate more BTCs, right? And we want to benchmark against that. And that's one of the main things that a lot of people often overlook. They're like, oh, but I invested $10,000 in DeFi and now I have $9,000 in DeFi. Yet those are the same people that go and they buy $10,000 of crypto and they just hold on for dear life, right? They hodl and essentially they don't complain or anything. And then eventually it ends up in their favor. Their 10 grand is worth, say, 30 eventually. And they're like, oh, I'm glad I held, right? This same mindset should be applied over here. It's just a little bit more active and we're benchmarking against holding. So again, if we can do that, if we can cut out that kind of back of our mind thought, we're like, oh, we're actually down, because again, there's going to be instances where our crypto is down, then we can accumulate more assets. We can let that one BTC, let's just say, go to 1.2, 1.3 and accumulate more assets. And ultimately, when we do see gains, perhaps now instead of 1 BTC, we have 1.3 BTC. And say BTC were to go, 2x or so, instead of having what we started with 10 grand and now having 20 grand, well, now we have 26K basically. Pretty simple like that. So keep all that stuff in mind. And again, this is my personal strategy. You don't have to copy it. I'm not recommending that you copy it. I'm recommending that you do some research and you learn more about DeFi. And if you guys need help with your DeFi journey, you want to work directly with myself or one of my team members, there's a link right below this video. It's going to tell you a little bit more about my strategy. And from there, you can apply, schedule a portfolio audit, and see if we're a good fit for each other and if we want to work together. I'll see you guys in the next video. Once again, if you enjoyed, like, subscribe. Let me know down below in the comments what video you want to see next, and peace out.